Hello, welcome to 15 Minutes of Consulting Best Practices. My name is Maria Isabel Rios, and as you can see today, we have a treat. I am joined by my colleague, Mahuli Dubé. Hello, Mahuli.
Hey, Maria.
Welcome to In Life. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Maria Isabel. It's good to be on here with everybody.
All right. For those of you who are new to the space, we answer your questions about how to create success and traction for your consulting firm. It takes us a minute to see your comments. So if you're here, the only way we know you're here is when you put a comment in the chat, in the space, in the comment space. So say hello and start asking your questions, right? That's how we know how we create acceleration. Hello, John, and hello, John. Thank you for saying hi to us. Bring us your questions. What questions do you have this week for us? Also, interact with the rest of participants and with the questions we have. Good morning, good afternoon. We cannot see your name. Hello, Caitlin. Thank you for your questions. We create richness by also adding your thoughts, adding your comments, add your experience. Do not be shy. And we like to start today by answering two questions that were leftovers from last week. We promised Chris, who had asked a question, that we would give him a second part of an answer because we answered really quickly at the end of last week's LinkedIn Live his question. So we owed him a more in-depth answer. And we're prepared to do that. And Julie also submitted a question that we didn't get to. So hopefully they're both in here this afternoon. Afternoon for us, evening for some, morning for others. And we'll get to hear and interact with our questions and our answers. So Jeremy, without further ado, and John, I see your question. We'll get to it third. So thank you for posting it. So Jaren, can you please share the question that Chris posted last week? Thank you. Okay, Mahul, want to put you on the spot. So Chris asked, how do you manage a client that wants to revisit decisions? So this is a situation where Chris has a client, they're working on a project, and the client wants to come back and revisit decisions that have already been made in the context of the project that they're working on. What's your advice? How do you manage a client that wants to go back and revisit decisions that were already made in the context of a project?
Well, Maria Isabel, the first part is to put things clearly on the table. So stay right side up. Inquire about the dynamic to the client. So basically, you'll be asking three main questions that come to mind to me, right? One is it a lack of trust that's leading the client to come back to reviewing decisions that have already been made, right? The other part is that they may not necessarily have all the inputs, right? And then the third part really is personal preference. But in all cases, we're really focusing on the client and staying right side up. What do you think, Maria Isabel?
Okay, so you're saying Chris needs to figure out what's triggering the revisiting of the decisions, right?
Yes.
What's the triggering point? Why are we going back and revisiting decisions? And say, for example, not all the inputs are on the table, right? Or something changed around the context. Then is that different than, say, it's a personal preference, which was the third option you gave? What would be your advice to Chris then?
Well, in the case of inputs, then that means then we may need to spend more time around that context discussion and clarifying what they need for input so that they have a little bit more confidence in how they go forward, right? And how we go forward, and we are all aligned on how on the client, on the decisions that we make, right? And then if it's really a personal preference, we basically have to start to set very clear boundaries here with our client and just say, you know what, this is what we agreed on. Maybe there's something else that we need to revisit and look at again, but it's just really, let's really focus on what it is that we're trying to solve for, but all the time staying right side up.
I completely agree with you. I think, Chris, like Mahul is saying, let's figure out what's triggering the revisiting, right? And then you take different approaches. if there's an element of something not being discussed, plan for it, right? Move the discussion ahead of time. Yes. Do it so that the discussion happened before the decisions are made, not after. Or if there's an input needed, do it before, right? That's what you're saying. I completely agree. If it is an element of personal preference, completely agree as well, not only in setting a boundary, but how do we capture that personal preference before a decision is made and not after a decision is made? So there's a little bit of thinking in terms of process. And as always, we're advocating for you being right side up, which means be transparent, talk to your client about it, put it all on the table, and encourage your client to be transparent with you. Say, what is behind the request, right? What's motivating the request? And let's problem solve around it together. So we're not stuck in the loop. We need to solve for this issue. Exactly, John. What has changed, right? What has changed? How do we make it work for all of us? Which gets you all ultimately to a better response. All right, let's go to the second question that was open, which was a question from, I think, Julie, if I'm not mistaken. And I see Jaren nodding, so thank you, Jaren. All right, Julie asks, what is a way to stay engaged with clients who just don't have a budget? And that's a question we get asked really often. And in this economic context, you're going to get more and more and more, right? So somebody really wants to work with Julie, doesn't have a budget. How do you stay engaged with a person like that? What's your thought?
So my thought here is just keep them as a prospect, right? Stay right side up and have those typical engagement touch points that you would with all your prospects. And when you do have those touch points, focus on them, share value, but don't give away work, right? So this is a very important part of it all. Just continuing to show value when you meet, share IP that you can, and that is free in some cases, but really just make sure that you're not moving away to starting to give away value when they really are still just a prospect.
Exactly. And there's a fine line, right, for all of us. You know, we're advocates for giving as much free as you can, because what you have and what you can share that is of value for others, if to the extent that you can, and you're not doing extra work, meaning you're not doing a project for free, but you're sharing what you know, and you can share it freely, go ahead, right? We're advocates for that, which is exactly what you're suggesting. That's a way to stay engaged with somebody who doesn't have a budget while they don't have a budget. But if you think they're a decision maker in the space where you are actually working on and they could potentially become a client, or where they're an influencer, where they could, maybe they themselves don't have a client, but they can introduce you to other folks in their world who do have budgets or who are decision makers, who can expand your network exactly with you. Maintain that relationship warm. Continue to be yourself, continue to share and add value. And also make it very clear in the relationship, even though as much as you want to help, you're not doing projects for free, right? And everybody can understand that so long as you continue to add value. So don't put yourself in the uncomfortable position where there's an expectation that you will do projects for free because somebody doesn't have a budget, while adding value to the conversation. Right. We have a question from John, which we want to address, right? And also pose your questions. There's quite a few of you here. What other question do you have for us today? So, Mahmoud, do you want to get to a question from John?
Yes. So John here is asking, how important is narrow vertical positioning?
All right. So, John, you have heard us talk about this before, and thank you for the softball. I very much appreciate it. We're huge advocates for specializing. We know in our work, which now it's over 400 consulting firms over the years, that it's easier to gain traction in a market when you have deep expertise. And that's often the differentiating factor between winning a piece of business or not, between being able to grow this, to grow your your firm exponentially or not, right? So develop deep expertise. Narrow vertical position, how important is it? From our perspective, very critical. Now, what you narrow is in a vertical or what you narrow is a service line, or what you narrow is the type of people you work on, that varies, right? But if you can narrow or you can gain deep in expertise in the combination of a vertical, the type of work you do, and also kind of who you work with along those three axes, now you're winning, right? So the narrower you can be, the better you will be, and the more you can win business, provided that is where the fish are. So you've heard us talk about fishing where the fish are. If you're in a market where there are fish, and that's a very important if, right? That's a headline, if, right. And like gold lines and all of that. If you're in a market where there are fish and you're very narrowly positioned, that should ensure your firm has a bright future in terms of gaining more business. What do you think?
I agree with that, absolutely. So just focus, right? I think there's a tendency for us to try and go for everything, but narrow positioning, we've found, as Maria Isabel says, through multiple engagements and several clients, that is the way to win the game ultimately. So just focus. I'm 100% aligned there, Maria Isabel.
All right. Hey, that's awesome. John, you have a question as well. And Eric, as we answer John's question, can you clarify your question? We read, how should I play this? Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you. Your larger question just came in as I was talking. So thank you for either hitting enter or having it hit right before. All right, let's get to John's question.
So John has a question here, Maria Isabel, and I think it's tied to the earlier question about how you stay in touch with a client that does not have a budget. He follows on and says, how do you stay in touch enough without spending lots of time going back to them? How do you stay in touch enough?
How do you stay in touch enough? And I'm assuming this is about how do you keep your connection warm enough and you don't overinvest in a relationship that right now doesn't have a budget, right? Yeah. So in touch enough, 3 or 4 times a year, a 111 email, which is a form of outreach, very simple, right? And for those of you who are not familiar with the 111 email, I'm not going to dive deeply into it today. Look it up. We can dive deeper into it in another LinkedIn Live if you need to, or send us a question, or go look at an article about them, or ask us, right? 3 to 4 times a year. If you happen to get into a short 15-minute conversation 3 to 4 times a year, that's typically also good of an investment, provided that you have the time and they are in your network core, right? This is all predicated on the fact that these folks are in your network core and they're temporarily without a budget. But you've determined that they are decision makers or they are influencers, and that without a budget situation is temporary in nature. All right. Eric, you had a question. We're going to park it for today, unfortunately, because we are at the 14-minute mark. And we'll take it up next Monday. You'll be the first question we answer next Monday as we come in. Sorry, Eric. All right. So as we get ready to wrap up today, and thank you all for being here and for sharing your questions with us, there's a few things we'd like to ask of you as always. So first thing, if you haven't already, and Jaren, if you like, please add the next steps. So connect with us, right? One way to come in here every Monday is to add, thank you, davidaffields.com/Monday Live. into a recurring event in your calendars. It will bring us to whatever LinkedIn Live provides for us. That way you're here with us every Monday. Second, as Jaren had put in before I confuse him, connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to be connected with you. We love to know what you're up to. Here are our handles. Maya Rios for me, Mahuli-Dube for Mahuli. Connect with us. We love being connected with you. And lastly, if you haven't subscribed to the articles, and we were just talking about one of them, davidafields.com/subscribe. So you're in for a treat. The comments are also gold, and the exchange in the comments are gold. We look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, remember that consulting is not about us. Consulting is about them. It's about our clients. It's about creating value for them, about making their lives richer, better, and creating momentum for them. So go ahead and do that during the week. And we see you next Monday. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.